to go to the parks as much as possible and fishing with my dad. And then I think probably I developed my greatest interest in nature when I was in graduate school at the University of Illinois. It was in 1954, and my roommates and I, who were all biologists, decided to go to Florida for the Fort Lauderdale party on spring break. And we went down the west coast, and we went across the old Tamiami Trail into the Everglades. And we kept seeing all of these wonderful things in the Everglades. And by the time we got to Fort Lauderdale, the party was over. So that was in the old days when there were actually places you could stay in the Everglades. They had motels and things, and we would pick up mosquitoes and put them in vials and take them back and see if we could get them identified. And I think it was the Everglades that really just turned me on. I just fell in love with that beautiful, beautiful spot. In 1954, it had only been a national park for about 7 years. So it was even more wilderness than it is today because lack of roads and things for the visitors were not there then. And my favorite thing, oh gosh, the Everglades I think is my favorite thing. It's just it's a wonderland. It's one of the national parks that I guess you would say was not chosen for the fact that it had beautiful scenery, but chosen for the fact that it needed to be protected. And every year we go back. We've been doing this now for 11 or 12 years, and lived in the park in a trailer for 11 of those, right in the park. And each year when we go back, we would learn something new and find a new spot to go to, and it's just increased my love of the Everglades and of nature. The Science Mystery series actually started when I got disenchanted with children's books that took them all through the process. Well, didn't take them all through the process, let me put it that way. Gave them the answers at the end, and they never had to get involved except for listening to the stories. So I had the idea of writing the stories that had no endings, so that the children had to do some science in order to finish the stories. And I met Paige Keeley and talked to her about it, and she introduced me to Claire, and we decided to write a book. And I wrote one book, and then that led to the second and the third and the fourth. And each one became a little easier and to write, and seemed to help teachers to be able to do inquiry in their classrooms when they felt that they couldn't, because of the fact that they were so afraid of doing open inquiry with their students. Yet with the stories, it required that the students do the hypothesizing, design the experiments, and come up with the ends of the stories. Now, whether the teachers actually have the children write the end of the stories, or whether they do their own lab reports, it doesn't matter to me. The fact is that they're getting involved in doing science. And that's what I think is kind of unique about the books. That as far as I know, they're the only stories that end in the middle and don't have an ending. I find out truly that students are used to being told what the answer is. Don't bother me with the facts, just tell me the answer. And of course, this is what teachers are trying to get away from now. And I used to have a program called What's in the Bag. And I would have someone, a graduate student or another teacher, load up a bunch of bags with everyday objects. And we'd pass them out to the students, and they could do anything that they wanted to do with the bags except open them, and they would have to report out as to what they thought was in the bags. And at the end, they would always say, okay, now let's open the bag and find we're right. And because I was trying to do science where you can't open a bag, I wouldn't let them open the bag. And when I knew I really had them invested in it is when they would get angry at me and say, but we have to open the bag, we have to find out what's in it. And I would often say, well, in science you can't open the bag, and that was my point. I was trying to get them to see that you have to go with what you know at this point, and when you get a better test, then you can find out more. But they finally got the point, but it took them a while to get angry. They've even accused me of being lazy enough to not make up more bags. So, but it was one of the most successful things I think I ever did with my students in an undergraduate and graduate teacher training, was to get them to understand the process of science, which is so seldom shown as a real process with all the warts, all of the dead ends, all of the things the failures, the things that they don't find out. And I think that's what kids are missing in science, to find out that somebody doesn't wake up in the morning and say, what'll I discover today, and be finished by supper time and have it all done. That science is an ongoing mystery, because I believe science is a mystery. And our role is to try to find the right question to ask of science. In fact, I'll just go one step further and say that my son, who was a physician in Western Washington at a teaching hospital, is trying to work with his students who are going to be doctors in trying to look at their complaints as patients as a mystery, which the doctor and the patient try to solve together. And therefore it takes a little more time, but it's much more personal, and they reach the solution and the prognosis and what they're going to do together. And I think that's important. Mm-hmm. I think that for the teacher, one of the most important things is to get the children to be able to question their fellow students with civility, and to do it in such a way that no one is insulted. I usually try to teach my students to say something like, I like your study and this is what I liked about it. What I don't quite understand is what you mean when you say this, so that it's respectful. And that's one of the first things the teacher does. And the second thing the teacher does is to listen to what the children are saying to each other. And by that, the teacher is also involved in a formative assessment as well. And because the books do include a lot of, in the stories themselves and also in the writing, what we call Don't Be Surprised, which looks at student misconceptions about science, the teacher can pick up where those are being changed or if they're being changed and know how to move on. And the teacher does a lot of moving around and listening. And one of my favorite mentors is Eleanor Duckworth from Harvard. One of the first things he says that we just don't listen to children enough. And I think these stories, and if they're taught in the right way so that their children are talking more than the teacher is, the teacher has a great deal of opportunity to listen to students and therefore learn where the students are and try to see where the students are from their point of view. It's so hard for us as adults to remember where we were at that point in their lives. And when we hear them, it helps us very much to get back to where they were and help them to move on from where they are to the next step. And I think one of the most important things is for teachers to realize that they're not going to be 100% successful in changing students, that the light bulb may go off 3 or 4 years later. And they may not be there to see it, but to know that they have had a part in the growth of their students.